Hello, we're back. Welcome back from Thanksgiving.
Yes, I think we're probably both well fed, maybe a
Very
little
well.
bit rested, cold.
I've actually felt jet lagged after Thanksgiving because my sister-in-law was in town and she is much more of a night, she needs way less sleep than I do and is a total night owl. And I was like trying to hang and trying to party and staying up late and watching movies. And like, I think it essentially put me into like a different time zone
Oh,
for
yeah.
the weekend.
It's like having
And
college kids home.
yeah,
It's the worst.
yeah,
She dragged you down with her. Good for you for trying, though. I think that's admirable.
I tried really hard.
The problem is when you're trying to stay up late, I think, and the partying. Like, if I can party at 3 p.m., that's fine,
Yeah.
as long as I'm in bed by 9. But to party and be staying up late is just a deadly combination.
Well, and then I still wake up early just because 'cause I'm old.
Early and probably, I'm guessing, feeling a little bit terrible, like just in
Right.
general.
And I was sleeping on an air mattress for 2 of the days, which
Oh,
doesn't
that's
help.
enough right there. That was like waterboarding.
Oh, and the first night, the air mattress was running out of air. It had a hole in it. Have you ever
Yeah.
slept on an air mattress with a hole?
I
Where,
don't
like, it
know.
just
Are there air mattresses that don't have holes in them? That's the only experience I have.
we kept waking up, like, we kept, like, rolling I was with my sister-in-law, and we kept, like, rolling into each other. She was like, "Get off me." And I'm like, I can't get off you. I'm sorry."
You were suddenly recreating planes, trains, and automobiles.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
always a highlight at any family gathering when you can get on a leaky air mattress for a ride with someone else. That's
Yes.
hilarious.
So, yes, well fed,
But
finally
a little
recovering.
tired.
Yes.
Yeah, a little okay, good. Well, fantastic. I hope that you are ready because you have picked out a really good topic for us today.
This one is juicy and so juicy that it's something I always hesitate to talk about, but
Mhm.
whatever.
We're gonna do it.
So I talked about it a bit on my LinkedIn this week.
Mhm.
And the topic I want to talk about is what should influencer agency fees. I think we should probably, I want to kind of set the stage. And I do think we were talking earlier that we're going to try to not be so inside baseball y and try to explain things more in case people haven't been
Right.
doing this forever like we
Right. We have a
have.
tendency because we speak the same language, you and me. We're like, pa, 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 pa," and we
Right.
really get into the minutia of it, which is thrilling for the two of us. But if we
Yeah.
can expand it a little bit for
So
other folks.
I think the simple way to refer to this topic is agency fees, but it also can be referred to as the margin because the way that influencer programs are typically priced out, and I'm seeing this change a little bit with some client like brand side work, but the way programs are typically priced out is you get, like, let's take a round number, you get a $100,000 budget from a client and you have to pull out a certain margin percentage to act as the agency fee. And then a certain percentage is going towards paid amplification. And then the remaining percentage is going to the influencers.
Yep.
And so a
Yep.
lot of clients will ask for a little pie chart showing what that breakdown is and looking to see what that agency fee, what that agency percentage is.
Well, should we start there with how appropriate do you feel that request is, even?
For the first probably 6 to 7 years of having Sway Group, I felt like it was inappropriate and we didn't have to answer it. But there were a lot of things that we didn't share and felt were inappropriate and that have changed over time, like we used to not give out the actual impressions or page or I mean, back in the day, it was page views when it was blogs. We used to not share the individual metrics from specific influencers. We would just give
The whole
aggregate,
program.
yeah,
Okay.
aggregate metrics for the whole program. And now that's
Interesting.
not really like we would never say no to. In fact, we always call out who the top performers were and are happy
Right.
to share that. So,
Right.
um,
Which is a function of the evolution of the industry in that
yeah,
brands are getting savvy about, we want to know who were the best performers so we can work with them again,
right.
right? So we can nurture those relationships or we can make lookalike audiences around those
Yeah,
people.
I think it's legit and technology has changed so that it's easier for us to there are a lot of reasons that that has evolved. The agency fee one, I don't know that I ever felt like it was inappropriate. I think I just didn't feel like I had to share it and no one was asking, and then all of a sudden they all started asking. What do you
Okay.
think on that?
I
question.
remember the first time we got that question from a client who shared with us what they were hearing from across the industry. And it was really more of how much of this budget goes to the influencers. Like, just give us a percentage.
Right.
And we were closer to the number they were looking for. We had a higher percentage of the total budget going to influencer. But I do think when we've encountered that, we actually resist divulging that. And here's what our rationale behind that is. And I think we need to clarify that you and I are talking about project-based influencer campaigns, but there's an entire world where influencer spend is modeled after ad spend. And that's a monthly investment, it's recurring. And that is, I think, confusing, muddying the waters a lot. So put a pin in that because
Yeah, I want to talk about some other ways to structure it that I think actually make more sense. But
yes,
so
let's get there.
a client asks you to share it and you just say no?
We won't pitch a program if that's the requirement, that we have to break down. Like, you've seen RFPs that are, hey, what's your hour, like down to your hourly rate or down to how many people are working on this or how many hours. That's one thing. But the other piece is, as an agency that is doing full service, what we take off of a brand's plate includes knowing what the influencer should be paid, negotiating with them, arm wrestling in some cases, like this for that. And then, so that the brand does not have to do that. To me, that's proprietary information. Our hard won expertise in dealing with influencers over and over and over again, building equity with the influencers that they're tapping into. So to me, it feels like asking for our proprietary knowledge that we've built in some ways, because you don't get where you are, Danielle, or where I am without having done this many, many years, many, many times, and building equity with the influencers. So to me, it could be like in the PR world when brands ask their public relations folks, can you just give me your list of journalists that give me your contacts and I'll just handle this. It's like,
Right.
but that's my business.
We don't
to do
share
that.
we don't share. We push back when asked to share exactly what we're paying each influencer.
Right.
We don't push back when asked to share the total amount going to influencers or the
Gotcha.
total percentage. Honestly, I think we'd have no clients if we did that. Other than our agency clients don't typically ask this
Right.
because
Okay.
they get it. This is their world, and
Right.
as long as they get what they need for the dollar amount, they don't really care.
And put a pin in that. That's a really important statement that you just made.
Yeah, but the brands are all asking. Now, even brands that we've worked with for 12 years, 6 years are suddenly now asking.
Okay.
For
Interesting.
that. Yeah.
Any insight on why that's happening more now than it has been?
I think it's a good sign. I think it means that influencer is now considered an actual legitimate part of the marketing mix. I think that influencer spends are increasing. And as brands are spending more on influencer, they want to do a better job of wrapping their hands around how that money is being spent. And I do think there's a lot of waste in the industry. For brands who do have one of their agencies handling influencer, and that agency then outsources it to you or to us. And there's two levels
Hands
of
in the
agency
pot.
fee, right?
Kind of.
Right? Like that doesn't make sense for a brand to be paying two layers of agency fee. Sure. Yeah. But so we don't push back on the percentage. What concerns me is that, and I laid some of this out in my LinkedIn post, and there are a few things, so we can take them.
Yeah. Let's
one
knock them
by
down.
one. So one, there's no consensus as to what that percentage should be. So if you're looking at in the paid media world, there's a consensus. There's, based on how much the spend is, it goes down, and those fees are usually between 6% and 15%, depending on the size of the spend. And that's
you're
kind of
saying
like knowledge.
the higher the spend, the lower the profit margin for the digital agency, the
Right.
programmatic or okay.
Right.
Right.
And we operate the same way. We always tell our clients, like, if it's up to 500,000, you can have this percentage of fee. If it's between 500,000 and a million, it can go down to this. If you're spending 7 figures with us, it will go down even more. So
It's
we're
economies of scale.
exactly,
Yeah.
totally. So yeah, so that's one thing I think is an issue, is that there's no consensus, and I've heard crazy varied
Okay.
numbers.
Can
Yeah.
you put what are they?
I talked to a woman who works client side for a very large brand at a conference. They spend 7 figures, low 7 figures a year on influencer, and the percentage that they're paying for an influencer agency fee is 50%.
Okay. So 50% is going to
To
the
the
influencers.
agency, or 50% is going to the agency, and then the remaining 50%
Is
is
divvied
either
up.
all going to the influencers if if they have another media buying agency handling media spend, or some of that is going to Meta, TikTok,
Okay.
YouTube, wherever.
Gotcha.
So that's probably the high end of what I've heard. I had a client come to me and say she wanted it to be 4%.
And even at low or mid 7 figures, 4% is because I think what people need to understand is if you're working with $1 million budget, conceivably you are managing a very large program, lots of influencers, lots of time. Like the timeline for that could be the whole year, could be 2 years, who knows? And so to say, well, but it's 4% of a higher number, that higher number also means there's just that much more work involved.
Right.
So let's do the math. In $1
Well,
million, that's
here's
$40,000 fee.
right.
Okay.
I'm trusting you on that. I have a calculator. I'll trust you.
You were told that there would be no math, and here I am.
Here's like a weird thing to add into that equation. And this comes from having done this for so long and having had discussions with mergers and acquisition bankers and venture capitalists and private equity firms looking to make acquisitions, and talking to lots of folks. There's an expectation for agencies like ours that our profit margin is between 10 and 15%. So if we're only taking 4% on our programs and then still have to pay all of our employees and our software and all the other overhead and our insurance and everything else that's going on, show me, like I just acknowledged, not good at math, but I can pretty confidently say that if you are charging a 4% fee and then paying all the things that you're paying, there is no way to have a profit margin that's between 10 and 15% at the end of the day.
That is fuzzy math. For sure. Yes. 5 out of 4 people have a tough time with math, and that would trip them up for sure. Yeah.
So that's one issue, is that there's no consensus as to what the percentage should be. And then when people do have ideas of what it should be, oftentimes they don't match up with what the reality needs to be. Issue number one.
Right. And what's particularly tricky about even those numbers that you just laid out, somebody is saying 4%. We're going to disregard the 4% for now. The quote unquote experts in mergers, acquisitions, funding, what a profitable business should look like is 10 to 15% profit. So that means the margin that you're charging on top in a $100,000 campaign has to be more than 10 to 15% as an agency fee, because your overhead probably has to be another 20%. I don't know. It kind of depends on a lot of variables, but there we go, where we're getting into the vagaries of it. But so even 10 to 15% is not viable.
Right. So that's issue one. Issue two is there is a lot of dishonesty in the space. There is an agency out there that we have been up against on programs, to the extent that the client was like, you're up against this agency. They're telling me they can do this. Can you match it? And so we were getting all of their numbers. They were saying that their agency fee was between 10 to 15%. In having conversations with bankers who know this agency, they are taking a margin on all campaigns of 65%.
That's a big difference.
So something's going on there. In having conversations with people who work at other agencies and hearing how they do it, there's a lot of double dipping
Mm,
going on where they can easily say that they're only taking 15% because then what they're also doing, I don't know if that's what this agency is doing, but there has to be something fishy going on. There are some agencies who say there's a 15% agency fee. What they don't disclose is that if they then say that 85% is going to the influencers, they're taking an additional 15 to 20% off of that as like a commission
hmm.
from the influencers. So there's like a double dipping fuzzy math situation going on
Sure.
in there.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and we don't do that. And I oftentimes kind of wonder if I just am walking through this world too honestly and it's kicking me in the ass. But if we take our margin and our agency fee and then we allocate a certain amount for advertising and that all goes to the amplification and advertising and then we allocate a certain amount to the influencers and that all goes to the influencers, like we're making money from the clients, we're not taking additional money from the creators.
Right. And just a pause to recognize you may think you suck at math, but man, are you a Columbo? Like piecing all this information together, having these sources in different corners of the world. That's awesome. Yes. So, how much of that, right? How much of that is being masked in wording, terminology around agency fee, 15%, but then influencer commissions, 20%. And you whittle it down to a point where you're getting 65% of the total budget.
Right.
And I am going to be neutral about the 65% unless you're not honest about it, which is then hurting those of us who are playing by a different set of rules and having to compete on 15%, which is not what they're actually, ending up. So that's, I think, where the problem, like you said, the dishonesty or the bad apples out there.
So my solution to this, which I wrote some op-ed about it for something like a year ago and it landed like a lead balloon, but we have gotten 2 RFPs in this format. I don't think because they read my op-ed, I think it's just how things are evolving and I like it, but based on something you said earlier, I feel like you won't like it.
Okay. Ooh, it could be our first point of tension.
Brawl?
Let's see if this is it. A brawl. Yes. I could take you because you're kind of down after Thanksgiving. You've been partying. I think I'm good. Let's go.
You're like a foot taller than me.
Well, there's that.
So, what I think would solve this issue is to be way more transparent about everything and move to a model that is more in line with how PR agencies price things, where there are hourly fees and you do come up with a monthly estimate of time or a time estimate for a campaign if it's not really a monthly type thing. And people have hourly rates and you charge based on those, and those hourly rates are priced as such that there's the agency fees kind of built in to them. Um, and then all of the out of pocket costs, including advertising and influencer costs, are just passed through to the client.
Mm, okay.
And that way
Yeah.
we make all the money we need to make. The client is fully aware of how many people are working on their program and how much time they're putting into it and how complex it is. If they think that they're spending too much, you can have a conversation like, why did this metrics person spend 20 hours on my report? And we say, well, you wanted all of this. And they're like, wow, you're right. Like, you can give me a much simpler report next time. Like, that's really, like, you can have like intelligent, mature conversations about it and there are ways to dial it back, but that way if they want to use a very pricey influencer, if they want to use more inexpensive ones, like there's no reason to hide that anywhere. It's just a much more transparent pricing model, I think, and would protect brands from I think they're getting taken advantage of by a lot of agencies, and I feel like it's hurting agencies like ours that are honest about what they charge.
Yeah. I'm not opposed to that. The couple of places that I think that will run sort of afoul of our best intentions is scope creep. is how do you account then, excuse me, for how do you account for, like in our case, maybe you do this the same way. We might have a budget for influencers, and depending on how we negotiate it, we can get 10, we can get 15, we can get 20. Let's just say the range would be 10 to 20. There's a whole lot more work involved with 20 than 10. There's twice as much work. So to me, there are some places where it works and some places, and then I know you're trying to protect the brands, which is awesome. And that's how we operate as well. There has to be then, I would say, any agency that wants to adopt what you're talking about has to be very, very, very clear in the scoping process, in the scope of work, proposaling, to not only say, here's what you have asked for and that we're proposaling, creating this proposal around, here's what's not included. And it has
Right.
to be really detailed because it's not about we did this really robust reporting and oh, next time we'll scale back. My guarantee is brands will be like, wait, why didn't you include this robust reporting? And you'll be like, that is out of scope. And then you're in a whole sticky
Yeah, I
mess
think
there.
I don't think it works for campaign-based projects.
Mm,
Like if we're talking about a single 6 to 8 week campaign,
okay,
I think this is not the right model for it.
got you.
I think this is best for annual engagements, and I think
Okay,
there is a lot of conversation and back and forth that goes into it. Like we're working with a client now, and she thought she was like so excited by nanos, and then they're not floating her boat, which is fine. And she's liking some of the bigger ones, and so we're making adjustments. Like there's always, with any client that you're working with over a longer period of time,
right.
I think
There's a
there's
learning
always gonna,
curve.
right. And so
There's
if
a,
they say
mhm,
like, you know what, we thought we were gonna use just one mega influencer and instead we wanna switch it to 20, I think then you have the 20 smaller ones. I think then you have the conversation of totally cool. The hours from the recruitment team, the quality assurance team,
mhm,
and the metrics team are going to go up a
mhm,
bit because that's more work for them, but you will probably, like you're going to end up with more content so that the
right.
value might be there for you. Like,
Right, right, right.
right? Like it's just I don't think pricing is complicated and
Yes.
negotiations are complicated, and managing
Yeah.
client relationships, it takes a lot of back and forth. Like I don't know that there's any like super easy answer.
Right, right. That's just my watch out
Yeah.
is having been through that with clients over the years of, I guess I'll just leave it at that, that as long as we are all, whoever's thinking about changing how they charge or how the fee structure, just to do it with eyes open around, go through very carefully with a fine tooth comb at the beginning to make sure that your client understands what they're getting for that fee. I'm all about that. Our proposals are nitty gritty. They're very, very detailed. What we're starting to do, like I said, though, is add in when we talk about, okay, you don't want to do a strategic analysis on the front end, totally fine. We will work with what you have. We're going to put that in this list over here. This is not in scope. Strategy is not in scope now. So later on, when that comes up, we can say, remember when in our
We always used to
proposal,
do that when I was at Edelman, and we were doing this more like here's the fee based on hours, and then here's the out of pockets. We would always have plus ups.
yeah,
So like, you want this extra report, that's a plus up, here's what it costs. You want to do a survey, that's a plus up, here's what it costs.
yes,
Like
I
that was
forgot
pretty
plus ups.
yeah.
Yeah.
That was pretty standard.
Yeah, it's been a minute since I've even used that language, but absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, but then you got into a really, I think, a salient point that we touched on at the beginning, which is there's project based, campaign based, and then there's this ongoing, always on. And if you're saying annual, to me, we've run one campaign that did take 9 to 12 months. So that seems still campaign project based, but you're blending, I think, the retainer model to some degree, maybe the monthly.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation that's interesting because the retainer model doesn't quite make sense for us because it's very hard. If you almost, I had a client compare it to website development, and I thought that was a really smart comparison.
How so?
Like an influencer, let's say there's a single sprint within a year-long program because something's launching and you have 5 influencers pulled in to work on that. It's not gonna fit within a month.
Right.
Like, the whole thing is
Right.
probably, if we're luxuriating about it, will probably take 6 to 8 weeks from start to finish, from, like, strategic brief to recruitment to approval to concepts to drafts
Yeah.
being submitted, approval, then the metrics, like, all of that, right? You're probably talking 6 to 8 weeks if we're like,
I'm so secretly happy to hear you say that, because there's this other conversation we'll have about brands expecting things in 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and you're like, who's doing it that fast? The influencer content might go out 2 weeks, 4 weeks in a window, but thank you. Okay,
yeah.
so let me not derail you,
So
but
that's
thank you.
like when we have the luxury, it usually takes 6 to 8 weeks. So it doesn't fit in a monthly
Right.
paradigm. So
Maintenance,
this
sort of.
yeah, this client compared it to website development because you can't charge a monthly fee for website development. It's a project. You charge it like a
Yes.
project.
Yes.
But we do have annual clients, and we get a budget for the entire year.
Mhm.
I mean, I guess you could divide it up by 12, but
You're not
we
charging
work
it like that.
we work with them for the whole year. We usually bill them quarterly, and we build out plans quarterly, typically for
Yep.
most of these
Okay, that
clients is
makes
how we
sense.
do it. Because you can't, like, we don't even know if TikTok's gonna be here Q2 of next year. So
For
we're not
sure.
planning a whole year.
Or I think I've told you this, where we were working with a wellness product that was an immune support. So, we'd been in development, strategy, laying it all out, probably for at least 5 or 6 months, planning to go live in May of 2020.
Right, this was the COVID one, you said,
Yeah,
but it went well.
it went well, but you
Yeah,
just don't know what happens.
right, yeah.
You've got to be nimble and flexible. Okay, but then, Danielle, there's this third beast in the room, which is treating influencer programs or activations like ad sales, like ad spend, not ad sales, ad spend. So, are you hearing or talking to anybody who, agency wise, brand wise, is spending monthly 30 grand a month, 100 grand a month to have an always on cadence of influencer? Or is that really affiliate?
We have clients who think of it that way, but it just doesn't ever really work out that way. Like, they might be
Mm,
budgeting it that way. We've had clients where we've sold them like, it's a 3-month program and it's this much per month, and, like, they can't get past that in their head, and so that's how it's positioned. But at the end of
yes.
the day, it's really just one group of influence. Maybe we can cadence out the content over the 3 months, but they usually end up saying, "No, let's have it all go live at the beginning so we have more flexibility with our amplification." And,
Right.
what if a piece of content that goes live at the end of the 3 months is the best one ever,
Right. And
and
I
we
think
run out of time?
it's worth talking about for anybody who's listening, that Danielle and I, as business owners, that's the other consideration. How do we structure all of this to, and what I mean by that is, I've been given the advice that brands these days like fixed costs. They know what their software subscriptions are every month. They know what their PR retainers are. And so if influencer could be a steady, regular fee every month, it's easier to budget for, it's easier for cash flow purposes. So that's why I'm asking that question. And PS,
Yeah,
I am hearing about these monthly budgets and influencer agencies that are tackling those. But again, I think it's from an ad spend perspective, which is where we then get into trouble, because those margins are 6 and 7% or maybe 10%.
right.
And then
Yeah,
there's
like,
make goods and
if they
there's
can't let go of the monthly if they can't let go of the monthly paradigm, like, how are they gonna ever let go of the, um, agency fee amount that they like, if they're so stuck in that ad buying world where it's a lower fee and it's monthly, like, if you can't let go
both
of
things.
one, it kind of indicates that they might not be able to let go of either.
Yeah. And I guess I'm surprised again to hear from you reinforcement, because we've always been project based, we've always been campaign based. And I also walking through the world feeling like, am I naive or are we the last of a dying breed? You're making a good case for that. You're saying that's the only way to run influencer to some degree. Like you can do extended and you can roll one program into the next, but you're saying that it's real because I have gotten the paper and pencil out. I have made people sit and talk with me about how can we turn this into a retainer model? And it's just like, it doesn't work.
It's hard. Yeah, I think there's probably ways that would be a fun project to work on a podcast. I don't think we're going to solve it
With your pie
on this
charts?
one. You know, I love a chart. But I think, yeah, I think there's ways that you can structure it. All of our annual clients have gotten really comfortable with the quarterly
Yep.
planning. And
Okay.
then sometimes there's other campaigns that pop up within it. Like maybe there's a base steady stream of content that's, we're planning out quarterly and running throughout the year. So there's stuff going live throughout the year, but then perhaps they have a huge launch or a limited time offer or something where they need to have just like
A little zhuzh.
a big put, yeah, a little
Yeah.
zhuzhing,
Yeah.
mid-July or
Sure.
whatever. Like that can be accommodated too. But we love the annual budgets with quarterly because then you can adjust. Yeah, yeah. Like we work with the dairy industry of Michigan, and sadly our event today got postponed because we had a snowstorm, but chocolate milk became the official sponsor of pickleball.
Oh,
And so we were doing a big event for them today at
nice.
a local pickleball place and having influencers come in and farmers and
Oh, nice.
athletes and doing a whole shindig, but that they didn't know about that at the beginning
Right.
of the year. So it's
Right.
nice to have that flexibility to pivot.
And this is one of your points you've said often that I adhere to also is have a little crazy money, have a little fun money set aside brands for the moment when chocolate milk becomes the pickleball official drink. And you can then jump on that and not be all tied up and go, oh, we're missing the window for that, which we're kind of getting a little off topic. But I would like to invite anybody who listens to this who is deeply experienced in running influencer on a monthly basis, like on that retainer. Again, I've heard it from other people. We have brands spending X amount a month with us. What does that look like? What are you talking about? How is that different? And I do think it's probably an affiliate play. I think it's a different beast. It's a volume play.
Yeah.
And I'd be curious about where the intersection is between what we've described and that, because I think it's messing with some of the benchmarks or the slicing and dicing of budgets that we
Yeah.
started this whole
It
conversation
muddles it.
around.
I
Yeah.
also would love to hear, I don't think anyone will share this, but I'm curious to know from brands what they think a fair agency fee percentage is and how they protect themselves against double dipping and I'm just curious to know what they think of this.
Yeah. And maybe does it matter to them when there are agencies like yours and mine where we go out and source talent, vet the talent, onboard the talent, negotiate, pay, 1099 them, all of that without a fee. We're not charging the influencers a fee. We've had influencers that are shocked that have asked us, well,
Yeah.
how do you make your money? I'm like, none ya. But it's not by adding on to your, like scraping off of your profit here. So I would be really curious if brands feel like there's any, and in my mind, the selling point is our agencies have really great equity with that talent, really great relationships because they know we're not doing that. They know we're not piggybacking on them and
Well, and we have
what you
to
see is
close
what you
this.
get.
We have to close this up. One more point. We might be able, as agencies, we might be able to pay some influencers a little bit less because there's less work required from them. They're not having to go through this complex contracting process. They're not having to handle the collections with the brand. They're not having to do like
They didn't market themselves to the
right.
brand and
We
go through all
take
that.
on, like, there are so many times a client comes to us and wants to make an edit and we handle the pushback on that, or we
Yes.
oftentimes even have our graphic designer go in and make some edits as a favor to the influence. It's just easier to
Yes.
have if it's something simple, as
Yep.
long as the influencer's okay with it, we'll add we'll add some text overlay, we'll cut something down a little bit, make something a little bit
Yes.
cleaner. So there's
So much value
we're
add
not just
there.
like rolling around in the dough and eating bonbons and like
Right.
making all this money off of people. Like we're actually paying people to do stuff that helps the
Right.
influencers and helps the
To streamline it, to take it off of the brand. I agree. I think there are so many emotional touch points. It's an emotional, the contracting piece, that, like you said, the pushback piece. We take a lot of the emotional lift and tension away from the brands by doing just what you said. Yeah, and that could be that's obviously a whole different conversation, but one to remember when that 10 to 15% conversation comes up of
Yeah.
what we're really offering is a pretty deep set of expertise and streamlining and getting it done, just
Yeah.
getting it done. So, great conversation.
Okay. Well, we'll come up with another juicy topic for next week, I'm sure.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Bye.